Hello everyone. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and let's go.
I want to have Ryan's baby. Just one. It's not a big deal. The words, spoken by Olivia in the quiet of a Friday night, were barely louder than the clinking of silverware, but to Andrew, they landed like the crack of shattering concrete. He was sitting at their dining table in their expensive, surprisingly quiet apartment in Chicago's River North. Andrew was not ready for this. After 12 years of a marriage built on a foundation of stability and mutual love, he was expecting to discuss a price hike on their gym membership, or maybe plan a winter vacation. Not this. He set his wine glass, still swirling with red, down on the polished oak table. The sound was too loud, too sharp. "You're joking, Olivia. Tell me you're joking." His voice was even, almost monotone. Andrew was always in control of his emotions. It was his professional creed. He was a partner at an investment fund, and his power came from cold, mathematical logic. In his world, where millions were on the line, any reaction other than ice-cold composure was a weakness. Now, however, his body was not listening to his mind. Beneath his custom-tailored suit, he felt his jaw clench, and deep inside, for the first time in years, a panic sparked. A real threat, not a financial one. His strength, his cool calculation, had just stripped him of the right to be angry. Olivia did not answer right away. She calmly finished a bite of salmon, dabbed her lips with a napkin, and looked at him. Her eyes, usually vibrant and teasing, were strangely calm. That calm was worse than rage. "No, Andrew, I'm not joking. Ryan found me. He needs an heir. You know how important the bloodline is to his family." She said it as if she were discussing buying a new car, with the same light, casual tone. "He made me an offer. I carry the baby, and after that, everything goes back to normal. We'll be the same. It's not a big deal." A wave of nausea hit Andrew, like his internal anchor had been ripped out. Ryan. A ghost from the past who was supposed to stay buried in their college years. Handsome, magnetic, completely irresponsible Ryan. He was old Chicago money, the inherited kind, not the earned kind. And now, Olivia, his wife, the woman he shared a home, a bank account, and a future with, was sitting across from him, proposing to temporarily trade their life together for someone else's archaic desire. Andrew had given her stability, but Ryan was offering a status she apparently valued more than their marriage. "Do you hear yourself, Olivia? You're my wife. We made vows. And you're sitting here suggesting that I, your husband, just step aside? Play the part of a bystander while you have another man's baby? Because he wants an heir?" Olivia finally showed an emotion. Annoyance. She waved her hand dismissively, like swatting away a fly. "Do not be so dramatic. It's just a biological process. I'm coming back to you. He'll cover everything. We'll go on with our lives. You've always been overly emotional about Ryan. You're overthinking this. I need you to be my rock, Andrew. But this is just a short-term project." "You're overthinking this." Those words were the opening salvo of the storm that was about to break over Andrew's life. The problem was not just the betrayal. It was that his wife had completely devalued their marriage, his feelings, and his place in their life, reducing 12 years of devotion to a short-term project. She was proposing a humiliating pause and saw no tragedy in it. Andrew rose from his chair, slowly, controlling every muscle so he would not flip the table. He walked to the window and stared out at the glowing skyscrapers. He had built this life. The comfort, the financial security, the stability. He was the anchor Olivia felt she could afford to drop, confident she could always pull it back up. You think I'll be waiting? You think after you go through with this, I'm just going to open the door and say, "Welcome back, honey"? His voice was still low, but now it had an edge of steel, hard and unbending. Olivia stood and walked toward him, trying to place a hand on his shoulder, but he sidestepped her. "You love me, Andrew. You always forgive me. You cannot live without me," she said with a confidence that was more insulting than the infidelity itself. It was not a question. It was a statement of absolute control over his feelings. She thought his loyalty was his weakness, and his financial support was her untouchable safety net. In that moment, standing by the window, Andrew did not feel rage. He felt an incredible, sobering cold. The fight was on. He realized his response could not be emotional. It had to be strategic. If she saw their marriage as a disposable asset, then he had to prove to her that he was not just a placeholder waiting for her return. He was his own entity, and if you removed him, their shared reality would cease to exist. "All right, Olivia," he said, turning to face her. His eyes were empty, stripped of their usual warmth. "You want this baby. You want to go down this road. Fine. I will not stop you." Her face lit up with a sudden smug smile. "I knew you'd understand, sweetie." "But you need to understand one thing," he cut her off, his voice so quiet she had to strain to hear it over the sound of the rain. "If you take this step, there's no coming back. You're not just walking out of our bed. You're walking out of this marriage. For good." That was his ultimatum. Andrew had just set the central conflict in motion and raised the stakes to the absolute maximum. It was Olivia's move. "You're being dramatic," she repeated with a shrug. She saw his even tone as weakness, a pathetic attempt to save face. She did not see the blueprint of a plan forming behind his eyes. "I'll be back, and you'll be here because you have nowhere else to go." "We'll see," was all Andrew said. He grabbed his coat and keys. "Where are you going?" she asked. "For a walk. I need to check my schedule," he replied, not specifying that the schedule was for his life without her. He walked out, leaving her standing in the middle of the living room. Olivia did not cry. Instead, she went to the fridge, pulled out an expensive bottle of French champagne, and poured herself a glass. She was absolutely certain he'd be back by morning, maybe a little hurt, but broken. She did not even flinch. In her mind, she was already hearing a lullaby for Ryan's child, not an epitaph for her marriage. She had no idea that Andrew was already executing his escape, and his plan had no room for forgiveness. He was not going to fight for her. He was going to teach her a lesson she would never forget. And that lesson began with his complete disappearance. Andrew did not come back in the morning. He did not come back the next day. He had not just gone for a walk. He had vanished. But this was not a flight of anger. It was a strategic retreat. Andrew rented a small featureless studio in the West Loop, near the noisy warehouses and new tech offices. The location was intentional. It had nothing in common with their elegant life in River North, and it was anonymous enough to serve as his headquarters. The morning after the ultimatum, Olivia woke up with a flicker of irritation. She had expected Andrew to be lying next to her, ready for a tearful but inevitable reconciliation. His absence, while unnerving, was quickly interpreted as a childish punishment. "He's just sulking. He needs time to realize he loves me more than his pride," she decided. That confidence, That ignorance of the sheer scale of his pain was Andrew's biggest problem. He had to prove that his love was not his prison. While Andrew sat in his new, empty lair, working on a new laptop and methodically reallocating their joint assets, Olivia went to her meeting with Ryan. The trouble found Olivia in the cold, sterile lobby of Warren Towers, an ultra-modern office building in Chicago's financial district. Ryan, as always, looked flawless. Expensive suit, perfect haircut, that same dazzling but superficial smile. But when they were alone in his opulent, soulless office of leather and glass, Olivia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Ryan did not hug her. He did not talk about the old days. He got down to business with the same clinical efficiency Andrew used to manage funds. "Thanks for coming, Olivia. Let's be direct." His voice was dry and clipped. "I do not want complications. We had a history, that's in the past. I need a child, my family name, my blood. You have the right qualities, and I trust you with the process." Olivia had expected, if not passion, then at least some flirtation. But Ryan was offering her a cold transaction. "I'll provide full financial support during the process," he continued, not even offering her coffee. "We'll get through this, and you'll go back to your life. But do not expect anything from me beyond my promise to care for the child. There is no us." Her heart stuttered. The whole way there, she had convinced herself that maybe Ryan would want to rekindle things, that this would be a brief, passionate escape, after which she would return to Andrew, washed in a sweet guilt. But Ryan did not see the woman he once loved. He saw an incubator, a signed contract. She was simply a means to his ambition. You're so cold," she stammered, feeling her pride begin to curdle. "I'm practical, Olivia. Emotions are what led to our breakup years ago. I have not made that mistake since. The emotions can stay with your husband." He emphasized the word your, distancing himself completely. Olivia, whose self-assurance had always been her shield, felt naked and humiliated for the first time. Ryan was using her without even offering the illusion of affection. In that moment, she realized her bet was fundamentally wrong. She had sold her soul for something that was not even on the table, and that doubled her trouble. Now she not only had to have Ryan's baby, but she had to get back to Andrew to patch up her crumbling self-esteem. Meanwhile, Andrew was methodically executing his plan. He worked late into the night in the studio that smelled of fresh paint and loneliness. He consulted with lawyers, not telling them the reason, simply reviewing their prenuptial agreement and drafting a plan to quickly buy out their shared real estate and financial holdings. Andrew was fighting a two-front war. First, he had to suppress his own hope, the hope that Olivia would come to her senses, call, and beg for forgiveness. He knew if he showed any weakness, his plan would backfire, and he'd be right back where he started, the loyal but weak husband. He opened a photo they'd taken last summer at Navy Pier. They were laughing, the sun catching in Olivia's hair. He stared at it until the pain became dull instead of sharp. He needed to kill the old Andrew inside him. He began selling personal items that were important to him, but symbolized their shared life. The vintage record player she'd given him for his 30th birthday. The painting they'd bought in Venice. He was keeping only what could be moved or liquidated easily. He was turning their 12 years together into financial assets and clean lines on a balance sheet. On the wall of his new studio, Andrew hung a single calendar. He had circled 3 dates in bold red marker. The day Olivia went to Ryan, the day he planned to finalize the sale of their apartment, the day he would disappear from Chicago. He had set a deadline for himself, to keep his heart from getting in the way. At the same time, Olivia, returning home after her cold meeting with Ryan, found that Andrew was still gone. She called him. His phone was off. It was the first crack in her armor of self-confidence. She was starting to feel that his ultimatum might not have been an empty threat. She felt dirty after the meeting with Ryan and wanted only one thing: to return to the safe, predictable harbor that had always been Andrew. Olivia had confirmed that Ryan was just a tool, but she had not yet realized that Andrew was no longer her husband. He was a strategist, preparing for an operation titled The End of the Marriage. That night, staring at the empty side of the bed, Olivia finally felt the first stabs of panic. But even now, she was sure Andrew would be back. She did not understand that he had already chosen a different city and a different life. 6 weeks had passed since the night Andrew walked out the door. For Olivia, those weeks were a rapid, meaningless descent. First came the anger. How dare he act like this? Then, the pride. I'm Olivia. He can't not live without me. But the deeper she got into Ryan's project, the faster those feelings melted away, replaced by a cold, rising dread. Her arrangement with Ryan became an unbearable contrast to the stability she had rejected. In Ryan's luxurious penthouse in Lakeview, filled with soulless modern art and impersonal furniture, Olivia felt like a temporary paid guest. Ryan, having gotten what he wanted, barely spoke to her. He did not notice her, did not ask how she was feeling. She was a function, not a person. The passion she remembered had been a mirage. Ryan had made it perfectly clear. She meant nothing to him. With each passing day, she thought more and more about Andrew. She remembered the gentleness of his touch, his quiet, dry humor, the steady hand that always found hers in a crowd. He was not just a husband. He was the anchor in her turbulent, ambitious life. And now, he was gone. Her calls to his old number were met with an automated message. This number is no longer in service. At the start of the 6th week, Olivia made a decision. She realized she had made a terrible mistake. She had to go back. It was not just a desire, it was a physical need. She needed Andrew to fix the damage Ryan had done, to restore her self-respect and her sense of home. I was just weak, she told herself. I'll explain. He'll see how sorry I am. He loves me. He always forgives me. He just needed time to act out his jealousy. This was her false hope, the one that would lead her straight to the edge of the abyss. She packed her things, casting aside the last shreds of her pride. She pictured walking in, how Andrew, angry but relieved, would pull her close, how she would cry into his shirt, and everything would be okay again. At dusk, Olivia pulled up to their building in River North. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and anticipation. A single light was on in the living room, a sign someone was home. He's been waiting for me, she thought with a wave of relief. She rode the elevator up, her fingers trembling as she brought her key to the lock. A soft click. The key went in, but it did not turn. Olivia frowned. She pulled the key out, checked it, and inserted it again. Nothing. She tried a few more times, pushing harder, then more gently. The lock had been changed. Andrew had not fought her. He had simply replaced the lock. Andrew! She called out, her fist banging against the heavy oak door. Andrew, it's me! Open up, please. I need to talk to you. Silence. only the muffled sound of movement from inside the apartment. Someone was in there. She felt panic flood her lungs like ice water. She pulled out her phone and dialed his number. Ring, 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 and then the familiar, soulless voice. "We're sorry. This number is no longer in service." Olivia took a step back from the door, her legs feeling like jelly. This was not a punishment. This was an exile. She went downstairs, walked out onto the street, and shivering, called his secretary. The woman, with perfect politeness, informed her that Mr. Bennett had resigned and left the city to start a new fund. "I do not have his personal contact information, that is, Olivia." Olivia wandered the streets of Chicago all night, her shoes soaked with autumn dampness. In the morning she returned. Taped to the apartment door was a small white notice. She tore it off with trembling hands. Property sold. No forwarding address. This twist was worse than any betrayal, because it was final. Andrew had not just left, he had erased their life together. He had not just sold his share. He had sold their home, their memories, their shared history. "Sold," Olivia whispered. She leaned against the cold hallway wall, feeling her world crumble. Andrew had not been waiting for her to come back. He had used the time of her betrayal to dismantle their marriage. Her false hope was obliterated. She was left standing in a dead end with no way out, no husband, no home, and no future she had taken for granted. She was alone in Chicago, expecting another man's child, and her anchor was gone. Olivia felt her world, once so solid and guaranteed, disintegrate into dust. She hastily rented a tiny, expensive, but soulless apartment in Lincoln Park, but even that offered no peace. She had to find Andrew, not to win him back out of love, but to restore her status, her pride. She had to make him acknowledge her. She began the hunt. She called his old office, hoping the secretary had lied. They dryly confirmed that Andrew had resigned to found a new, competing fund in another state. She tried reaching out to their mutual friends, but they, having heard about the Ryan project, either turned away or gave her evasive, judgmental answers. Andrew was not fighting her. He had simply made it so there was nowhere for her to hide. She had only one hope left, one last anchor: his family. Olivia got in her car and drove to Evanston, to the home of his mother, Mrs. Bennett. The house was old, sturdy, with a perfectly manicured lawn, the embodiment of the very stability Andrew cherished and she had so despised. When Mrs. Bennett opened the door, her usually soft face was as hard as stone. "Mrs. Bennett, please," Olivia begged, her voice trembling with a mix of desperation and humiliation. "I just need to know where Andrew is. I need to talk to him." Mrs. Bennett did not invite her in. She held on to the door frame, her eyes, so much like Andrew's, cold and unwavering. "My son gave you everything, Olivia," she said quietly, but with an absolute, unyielding force. "He gave you loyalty, a home, peace, and you threw it away for another man's whim. Andrew has finally learned to value himself more than you ever valued him. Leave, and do not come back." The door closed, not with a slam, but with a final, heavy click that sounded to Olivia like the fall of a judge's gavel. She realized Andrew had not just turned away from her, he had taken his entire family with him. He had left her with no allies, no back doors. He was systematically erasing his legacy from her life. Olivia was left standing on the driveway in the cold wind. Her friends, his connections, her social pillars, They had all collapsed. She was alone, not by her choice, but by Andrew's sentence. After weeks of fruitless searching, she sank into despair. The nights alone in a strange apartment became torture. Memories of her old life washed over her like a tsunami. The way Andrew laughed, the way he brought her coffee in bed, the way he held her hand on airplanes when she was scared. She had traded that real, quiet love for Ryan's cold, selfish project. Olivia tried to find comfort with Ryan. She called him, explaining that Andrew had left and she was struggling. Ryan, consumed by his work and awaiting the results of his project, barely listened. Olivia, we have an arrangement. Your personal problems are not my concern, he said, his voice mechanically polite. Focus on the process. I need assurances that you'll remain stable. Olivia hung up. She had no one left. Not Andrew, not Ryan, not her friends. She was at a dead end. Andrew, without uttering a single angry word, had won. He had turned her life into the isolation she deserved. She realized her punishment was not his rage, but the void she had created herself. One night, she found an old folder of his financial documents. Tucked inside were photos from their honeymoon in Santa Barbara, black and white snapshots of them, young, carefree, looking at each other with a true, untainted love. Olivia clutched them to her chest. She had sold that love for a fantasy of pride and had been punished with the total loss of her world. A wild thought came to her. He must be hiding somewhere in Chicago, enjoying her pain. He was waiting for her to come crawling back, completely broken. He had to come back, because she was irreplaceable. But this last, desperate gasp of pride was just the final, fatal blow. Andrew was not hiding. He was moving forward, and she was standing still in the cold wreckage of her life. She was ready for the final act, not realizing her role in his life had already ended. Nearly 5 months had passed. Olivia was living in Lincoln Park, in a rented apartment that felt like a temporary shelter from her own failure. Ryan, after confirming his project was a success, had practically vanished, leaving behind only monthly wire transfers and dry messages from his personal assistant. His goal was achieved, and Olivia had been cast aside like a used tool. She was at a dead end, not just emotionally, but socially. Her pride, however, was dying a slow death. She could not accept that Andrew could just disappear. She believed his silence was a sophisticated form of torture, that he was somewhere in Chicago, savoring her humiliation, waiting for her complete surrender. Olivia, using her old business acumen, began a methodical search. She contacted former employees from his fund, analysts at competing firms, until finally, she stumbled upon a semi-random LinkedIn post from a former colleague of Andrew's. The post mentioned the next chapter in Andrew Bennett's career in Denver. Denver, 1,000 miles from Chicago. This was not hiding. It was a rebirth. Olivia ignored logistics, pain, and common sense. She bought a one-way plane ticket, driven not by love, but by a furious need for confrontation. She had to make him acknowledge her pain. A day later, she was standing in downtown Denver, Colorado, surrounded by unfamiliar mountains and a brighter, alien light. She found him. Through intermediaries, she learned his new address, a beautiful townhouse in the Low-High neighborhood, but she did not go there right away. She began to watch. And there, sitting in a rental car in the cold November wind, Olivia saw him. He was walking out of a small, cozy cafe, but this was not the Andrew she knew. That Andrew wore a strict, impeccable suit, his face perpetually tense with financial responsibility. This Andrew was in a soft sweater, his shoulders relaxed. He was laughing. It was a free, uncontrolled laugh, and he was not alone. A woman was standing next to him. Her name was Julia. She was the complete opposite of Olivia. No flashy brands, no sharp angles. She had a simple elegance, and she was looking at Andrew as if he were the only man in the world. Her hand was intertwined with his, naturally. They looked like a single unit, their bodies angled toward each other in a calm, intimate harmony. The blow was so powerful, Olivia barely kept her hands on the steering wheel. She had expected to find Andrew suffering. She had expected to see him broken, gaunt with longing. Instead, she saw him whole, renewed, and worst of all, happy. This was the last straw. She realized he had not just left. He had replaced her. Not with a fight, not with a temporary fling, but with real, quiet happiness. Olivia's pride, wounded and desperate, forced her to act. She got out of the car, her legs carrying her across the street toward the cafe table that symbolized everything she had lost. She stormed into the cafe. The buzz of conversation died down. "Andrew!" Her voice was too loud, too sharp for this quiet place. "What are you doing?" Andrew looked up. His smile vanished instantly, replaced by a cold, hard mask she had not seen even during their worst fight. He had been ready for her. "Olivia, what are you doing here?" He said it calmly, but his tone held no surprise, no anger, just a statement of fact. Olivia turned her fury on Julia. "And you? Who are you? What have you been telling him? You think you can just steal my husband?" Julia slowly turned her head. She was completely unfazed. She did not pull her hand from Andrew's. Instead, she squeezed his fingers as if to reinforce their bond. "I did not steal him, Olivia," Julia replied. Her voice was quiet, but sharp as a shard of glass. "You threw him away. I just picked up what you did not value." Those words hit harder than any curse. Andrew did not defend Julia. He just looked at Olivia, and in his eyes there was nothing but indifference. Olivia felt her knees buckle. In that moment, she understood that her punishment was not his anger, but his complete lack of emotion toward her. He was not holding a grudge. He was just moving on. And she was just an old chapter he had closed for good. The moment Andrew had turned back to Julia, it was over. Olivia stood in the cozy Denver cafe, surrounded by a foreign, happy life, and felt her world finally collapse. She had come to make him suffer, and instead, she was handed the cruelest, coldest truth. She no longer had any power over him. Olivia stumbled out of the cafe, tears streaming down her face. But they were not tears of anger anymore. They were tears of loss. She glanced back through the glass and saw Andrew, without looking back, without even flinching, lean in toward Julia and continue their conversation, as if the incident had been nothing more than the fleeting buzz of an annoying fly. Andrew had completed his emotional escape. He had used the time Olivia wasted on her fantasy with Ryan to transform himself. In Chicago, he had been a hostage to his own loyalty. In Denver, he was a free man who had found what he valued most: peace. His escape was not about running from Olivia, but from the old version of himself who was always ready to forgive her. He had used his own skills, precision, strategic planning, to achieve that freedom. The days in Denver were torture for Olivia. She was trapped between the mountain landscape, which symbolized his new, higher aspirations, and her own low, humiliating reality. She tried calling him again, sending desperate, rambling messages. In response, Andrew sent her a single, official email. The text was short, cold, and CC'd to his lawyer. All property matters have been settled. You have received compensation for your share of the real estate. Please cease all contact attempts. Any further communication will be regarded as harassment. There was no hatred in the email, no curses, just pure, legally vetted indifference. It was the complete end of their story. He had not just put a period at the end of the sentence. He had ripped out the page. Olivia returned to Chicago, to gray, endless months. She moved into a small piece, cheap studio on the outskirts of the city. Ryan, having gotten what he wanted from her, now saw her as an irritating loose end, and their communication dwindled to nothing. It came out that Ryan had married another woman shortly after Olivia's pregnancy was confirmed, using her only to secure his bloodline without disrupting his plans for a more advantageous marriage. Olivia had been doubly deceived, by Ryan, who never loved her, and by herself, for believing Andrew would never leave her. Years passed. Olivia grew older with a sense of constant, undulled regret. She often found herself searching for his face in a crowd. One day, she saw a photo of them in a magazine. Andrew and Julia had founded a successful charitable foundation, and his new investment fund was thriving. They looked even happier than they had that day in Denver. Andrew was not just living. He was flourishing. It was then that Olivia finally understood the true nature of Andrew's revenge. His punishment was not about making her hurt. It was about showing her how much better his life was without her. He had not become an enemy she could hunt down. He became the living embodiment of her lost happiness. Olivia had traded real, devoted love for a moment of pride, and in return, she had given Andrew complete, non-negotiable freedom. He was supposed to wait. He was supposed to forgive me, she would whisper into the emptiness. But Andrew had made his escape. He had used his willpower to break free from a toxic bond, and his new life became Olivia's most powerful and coldest condemnation. She had not just lost a husband, she had lost her guarantee of happiness. And that realization became her life sentence, a quiet, unending regret. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and comment. We'd love to discuss this story with you. See you in the next video.